police informant whose testimony helped convict drug traffickers, gun smugglers, and members of the Hells Angels, now says he fears for his life.
This is what happens when you snitch on your own brotherhood. Like most men who rat on the Hells Angels are hunted down. But for Clarence Butch Crouch, the club never had to pull the trigger. After turning to the feds, the former vice president's life spiraled into paranoia, isolation, and finally, a murder-suicide that shocked everyone. So what pushed him there, and what secrets did he take to the grave? Let's dive in to find out. The man they called Butch. It all started in the late 1960s, when Clarence Butch Crouch helped create one of the most dangerous biker clubs in America, the Bandidos Motorcycle Club. Back then, the roads of Texas were filled with outlaws chasing freedom, and Butch was one of them. He wasn't just another rider. He was part of the original crew that laid the foundation for what would become one of the most feared organizations in the country. Within the Bandidos, Crouch earned a reputation as challenging, unpredictable, and respected. He handled problems his own way, fast, direct, and often violent. But by 1969, everything changed. Butch took off his Bandidos cut and walked away. Most men who quit an outlaw club don't live long afterward. But Butch had something others didn't have, an offer from the top. Sonny Barger, the founder of the Hells Angels, personally reached out to him. Barger wanted to expand the Angels into new territory, and Crouch was the man to do it. He accepted. By the early 1970s, Crouch had moved to Cleveland, Ohio, helping to build and organize one of the Angels' most active chapters. He climbed fast, earning the position of vice president. Inside the club, he was both respected and feared. A man people didn't cross twice. The Cleveland Hells Angels had a reputation that stretched far beyond Ohio. They were known for drug trafficking, violent clashes with rival clubs, and links to organized crime across the Midwest. Within that world, Butch Crouch stood out. As vice president, his word carried weight, and his loyalty was never questioned. But that kind of power came with pressure. Every decision meant life or death for someone. Over time, Crouch began to see cracks forming in the brotherhood he once trusted, and those cracks would soon lead him to make the one choice no Hells Angel was ever supposed to make. At his peak, Butch Crouch controlled more than just a clubhouse. He controlled fear. As vice president of the Cleveland Hells Angels, he was tied to the club's most violent years. Investigators later connected his chapter to drug trafficking networks, extortion rackets, and multiple murders across Ohio. One of those killings was the 1974 drive-by shooting in Akron, a hit that went wrong and left 18-year-old Donald Desario dead. Within the Cleveland chapter, brotherhood and brutality coexisted. Every man swore loyalty, but no one felt safe. Discipline was enforced through intimidation, and those who disobeyed paid with their lives. Crouch wasn't just enforcing the rules, he was helping write them. He had the kind of authority that made people follow orders without question. That power gave him influence, and it's precisely why his betrayal would later destroy everything the Cleveland Angels had built. When brotherhood turned blood red by the mid-1970s, the Cleveland Hells Angels were one of the most active chapters in the Midwest. But the brotherhood that was supposed to protect its members was beginning to fracture from within. Around 1974 or 1975, one member decided to prove himself in the worst possible way. He wanted to roll his bones, a biker term for earning a full patch by committing a violent act that demonstrated loyalty. Without the club's approval, he and a few others planted a bomb at a house they believed belonged to a rival. The explosion killed 3 people, including a mother and her 18-month-old baby. For most of the Angels, it was just another headline, collateral damage in a war they didn't talk about. But for Butch Crouch, it was different. The baby who died was the same age as his own daughter, and the image haunted him. That night changed everything. Crouch started to see the club for what it had become, a group where violence was no longer a last resort. It was the rule. He began pulling away, quietly questioning the code that once defined him. The Cleveland chapter didn't notice the shift right away. To them, Butch was still loyal to the vice president, who kept everyone in line. But deep down, something had broken. For the first time, Crouch realized the brotherhood he helped build was capable of killing children. And that thought stayed with him. The seeds of betrayal had been planted. By the late 1970s, the Cleveland Hells Angels weren't just fighting rivals, they were fighting each other. Drugs, paranoia, and suspicion were tearing the club apart from the inside. According to Clarence Butch Crouch, who later told investigators, the Cleveland chapter had become a war zone. He said members were arming themselves not against outsiders, but against their own brothers. Crouch claimed that James Bailey, the chapter's treasurer, had started keeping receipts and building evidence of financial fraud against other members. Meetings meant to resolve the issue quickly turned into shouting matches and threats. Not long after, Bailey was found shot and killed. At Bailey's funeral, another member, Chip Philemon, was also murdered. Inside the clubhouse, bikers demanded answers. How could members kill their own without authorization? Richard Vesey, another senior figure, tried to calm the storm, insisting the chapter needed unity. But unity was already gone. The Cleveland Angels had crossed a line, from organized chaos to outright self-destruction. And Crouch, watching from inside, knew the brotherhood he'd once sworn to protect was collapsing one murder at a time. Out bad. By 1981, everything in Clarence, Butch Crouch's world, was falling apart. His marriage had collapsed, and his wife, desperate to escape the violence, took their children and fled. For a man like Crouch, family was the last thing keeping him grounded. When they left, so did his reason to stay loyal. He began to spiral, drinking heavily, paranoid, and angry. Inside the Hells Angels, leaving the club wasn't as simple as walking away. Members who quit without approval were labeled out bad, a death sentence in outlaw terms. Once you were out bad, the brotherhood became the enemy. There were no second chances, no forgiveness, and no running far enough to hide. Crouch knew the rules. He had seen what happened to men who crossed the Angels. And he knew that if he disappeared quietly, they would come for him and maybe for his family too. There was only one way out: beat the club to the punch. By the early 1980s, the walls were closing in. Federal and local authorities had begun tracing the murders, drug deals, and weapons trafficking tied to the Cleveland Hells Angels, and Crouch's name was showing up in too many files. Investigators were collecting witness statements and surveillance, building cases that could put him away for life. Inside the club, members were starting to turn on each other, paranoid about informants and leaks. Crouch could feel the pressure from both sides. The government wanted his conviction, and the club wished to keep him silent. Either way, he was running out of time. He realized there was only one path that might keep him alive: cooperation. Facing a lengthening list of criminal charges, Crouch offered to turn state's witness in 1981. At first, he played it smart, still showing up at the clubhouse, still pretending to be loyal. But behind the scenes, he was negotiating with federal agents, offering information in exchange for witness protection for his wife and children. He was planning his betrayal, one that would destroy everything the Cleveland Hells Angels had built. The deal with the devil. After years of living by the outlaw code, Clarence Butch Crouch made a decision no one saw coming. He picked up the phone and called federal agents. He contacted both the ATF and the U.S. Marshals Service, offering to hand over everything he knew: the names, the crimes, the inner structure of the Cleveland Hells Angels. But there was a condition. He wouldn't talk unless they agreed to protect his family. Crouch demanded that his wife and children be placed in the witness protection program before he gave up a single name. Once the deal was set, his testimony began. And when it did, he didn't hold anything back. He ratted out his entire Cleveland chapter, exposing the violence, drug trafficking, and murder that had been buried for years. His cooperation destroyed what little trust remained inside the club. Then came the most significant moment of all his confession. I need to tell you guys something. I killed Donald Desario. Donald Desario was an 18-year-old who died in a drive-by shooting that had been aimed at someone else. It was one of the club's most closely guarded secrets, and Crouch had just admitted it himself. He was sentenced to 10 to 40 years in federal prison, and word spread fast. The Cleveland Hells Angels knew he had flipped. In the biker world, betrayal is worse than death, and for the Angels, Crouch's betrayal was both. The brotherhood was officially broken. When Clarence Butch Crouch officially became a government witness, the damage was immediate. His cooperation began in 1981 under a formal agreement that granted him federal protection, a new identity, and relocation for his family in exchange for full testimony. He revealed everything: names of members, their roles in murders and bombings, and details of the club's drug and weapons routes across Ohio and neighboring states. Agents called his testimony a roadmap to the Cleveland chapter's criminal empire. What followed were indictments, raids, and arrests that tore the chapter apart. For the Angels, it wasn't just a betrayal. It was a blueprint of their entire world handed to the enemy. And for those who once called Crouch a brother, there was only one word left for him: RATTED. The fallout from Butch Crouch's betrayal was immediate and irreversible. Within months, the Cleveland Hells Angels went from one of the strongest chapters in the Midwest to one of the most unstable. Raids, indictments, and prison sentences tore through the ranks. Members turned on each other, and anyone suspected of talking to authorities was either expelled or vanished quietly. The club's leadership fractured, and for the first time in years, Cleveland wasn't feared, it was watched. Crouch exposed the power structure, the money flow, and the unwritten rules that kept the Angels untouchable for decades. For law enforcement, it was a breakthrough. For the Hells Angels, it was the beginning of an era of paranoia that never really ended. Witsex, the reality behind the lie. When the U.S. Marshals agreed to protect Butch Crouch's family, his wife and children didn't walk into a better life. They were dragged into a secret one. In the middle of the night, armed marshals stormed their home and took the children from their beds. There were no explanations, no goodbyes, just fear. They were told they were being protected, but it didn't feel that way. When the paperwork was ready, the family was relocated to Montana, not to Florida or California like they'd requested. The move made no sense to them, but to the marshals, that was the point. Nobody would think to look for them there. They were given $1,261 a month to survive. There was no car, no winter clothing, and no counseling for the trauma they'd just lived through. The family was issued new names and fake social security numbers, some copied from people who had already died. They never received birth certificates, which would later destroy their ability to live everyday lives. As the years went on, the children faced one bureaucratic nightmare after another. They couldn't get marriage licenses, college enrollment, or even bank loans, all because, on paper, they didn't exist. For the Crouch family, witness protection wasn't safety. It was a different kind of prison, one built on lies, fear, and the constant reminder that the truth could get them killed. The marshals made one thing clear: protection came with a price. Families in witness protection weren't treated equally. The better the testimony, the better the life after. Because Crouch's cooperation didn't lead to major convictions at first, his family received the bare minimum. Each month's check barely covered food and shelter, and every time his case stalled, their support got thinner. To Jackie's family, it felt less like protection and more like punishment for being the wrong kind of witness. The man they couldn't hide. After serving about 8 years of his sentence, Clarence Butch Crouch was released and given a new identity. Under the name Paul Dome, he moved to East Texas, hoping to disappear for good. For a while, it worked. He lived quietly, remarried, and kept to himself. But he never stopped writing to the U.S. Marshals, the Social Security Administration, and anyone who would listen. His letters were constant, often desperate. As the years went on, his health began to fail. His letters turned into pleas. "I need medical care." But no one came. Then, in 2013, everything ended in tragedy. Crouch killed his wife and his stepson, set their house on fire, and then ended his own life as firefighters arrived. Local authorities later described him as a man broken by pain, both physical and mental. Years of isolation, guilt, and sickness had finally caught up to him. But even at the end, he was still the same Butch Crouch, living and dying on his own terms. Legacy. In blood and paper. After his death, his daughter, Jackie Taylor, went through what he left behind. Inside a large steamer trunk, she found his entire life, letters to the ATF, correspondence with the marshals, and a 100-page manuscript covering his time in the outlaw world from 1966 to 1981. Every page detailed something about the club's inner politics, the long rides, the violent jobs, and the people who never made it home. It was a gold mine of outlaw history, written by one of the men who lived it. At the bottom of the trunk, she found something else, her father's original patches. In outlaw culture, those patches are sacred. They're never supposed to exist off a biker's back. Jackie decided to return them herself. She traveled to Cleveland and walked up to the Hells Angels clubhouse. When the door opened, she introduced herself. "I'm Jackie Taylor," she said. "I'm Butch Crouch's daughter. I'm here to return his patches. He's dead." A few days later, the club's current president, a man who had once babysat her as a child, called her. "You were never in danger," he told her. "We just wanted Butch." For Jackie, those words ended decades of fear. Aftermath and reckoning. The fallout from Clarence Butch Crouch's betrayal shattered the Cleveland Hells Angels. The chapter's unity was gone, replaced by suspicion and silence. For years, no one fully trusted anyone, not after one of their own had turned them in. But while the club tried to move on, the real story didn't end with Butch. It continued through his daughter, Jackie Taylor. She became the unexpected voice for the forgotten children of witness protection kids, who never chose to live under false names or fake identities. The scars of that life followed her into adulthood, and even into the next generation. Her own children became victims of the system too, losing Medicaid because she lacked a proper birth certificate and legal identity. That moment pushed Jackie to act. She began speaking publicly, demanding accountability and reform in the witness protection program, especially for families who never received counseling or support. She became an advocate for mental health, identity restoration, and justice for those the system left behind. Her voice grew louder with the release of her podcast, Relative Unknown. In it, she exposes the hidden failures of WITSEC and tells the stories the government never wanted discussed. He broke the code of the Hells Angels, and the government broke the code of humanity. Why this matters. When Clarence Butch Crouch flipped, the government thought they'd landed gold. A Hells Angels vice president was ready to talk, ready to spill names, murders, and secrets from the inside. But the results were far less dramatic. Across 3 federal trials in the 1980s, Crouch took the stand, describing bombings, shootings, and internal power plays inside the Cleveland chapter. Each time, juries listened and then walked the defendants free. The evidence was too old, the witnesses too scared, and Crouch himself too damaged to make a credible case. Despite all the information he gave on guns, drugs, and murder, almost no one went to prison because of him. For all his cooperation, the government gained insight, not justice. And in return, Crouch lost everything: his club, his family, and eventually, his mind. Inside federal agencies, his case became a cautionary file, proof that turning a high-ranking outlaw can expose a world, but it doesn't always dismantle it. He helped law enforcement understand the Hells Angels better than anyone before him, yet he couldn't help them stop it. In the end, the empire stood. The only thing truly destroyed was the man who tried to bring it down. He broke the code of silence and paid the ultimate price. Clarence Butch Crouch thought turning to the feds would save his family, but it only buried them under a new kind of danger, one built on fear, lies, and regret. But in the world he left behind, there were still those who ruled with no fear at all, especially one woman who became more ruthless than any man around her. Click on the next video to see how far she went to earn her place in the Brotherhood.